Okay, welcome to the live stream, and today's topic is isolation. And I've chosen this one because it seems to be one that's hitting home with a lot of people right now, and because we've had a spate of people who have been very depressed over being lonely on the Discord itself. Does anyone want to start off talking about this, or shall I?
Start.
Okay then. Well, isolation is something that seems to hit men a lot harder for some reason. Possibly because we're set up to be more independent, or at least we like to think we are, and that can lead to us being off on our own and people feeling like we can cope and leaving us to it and not checking up on us and so on and so forth. I mean, obviously, the isolation is something that affects everybody, and we've all met people of both genders who are off in like a little flat somewhere, unable to really talk to anybody because they don't know anyone, and so on and so forth. But isolation it seems to hit men a lot harder, and I've noticed a lot of people in support over the last few months who have been hit really badly by it. We've had several who have hinted that they're close to suicide, and we have had this year more people who we've suspected have tried suicide, or who have said they've tried suicide, or who have actually just sort of talked about suicide and then vanished suddenly and never come back. So it's a very very topical sort of thing to talk about with the virus and things like that, but it is something that affects men in a much wider sense. I've suffered it when I was before I got with my partner. I was incredibly lonely for several years. There was absolutely nobody in my life except my parents and my brothers, and they were very much at arm's length at all times. It was like they were quite a bit away from me, and there were some other complications I don't want to get into. But for a long time, I lived alone. I talked to nobody. I worked on various things and writing and so on, but I didn't really have any outlets, and I could feel myself slowly going insane with it. And it creeps up on you. At first, for a couple of weeks, isolation can be nice, like if you're used to being in a house where you don't have your own privacy and things like that. But after like 2 weeks or so, you start to realize how empty your house is, or your flat, and you start to look, you start to wander around. You'll go from kitchen to like the bedroom and back again. You'll be very listless. You'll just sort of exist in this space, and you won't really know what to do except play computer games or read or anything like that if you're stuck on your own. And you can try and reach out to other people, but other people do have their own schedules, and sometimes it's not as easy for some people as others to reach out and connect with other people. Some people, it's incredibly natural. It's they go, they know exactly where to go, they know exactly what to say, they feel comfortable saying it and everything like that. But other people, they can get locked into their isolation. They can feel like there's nowhere to go out to. They'll think about joining clubs, but then, well, that's scary. They'll think about going to the pub, and maybe they will, and they'll sit in the corner and they won't really talk to anyone. They won't really do anything. Maybe somebody will talk to them, but it's very hit and miss. And even doing that can be frightening for some people. They can feel out of their element, and they can develop reasons not to do it. And like, it'll be, the day they're supposed to go and they won't go. they'll or they can get depressed, they can get sleep deprived, staying up all night, like on computers and things like that, or even quite late and getting your sleep cycle disrupted by the blue light and stuff. You end up in this zombie state where you don't really want to talk to other people, but you want to fix your own problems, but maybe you can't. And it's this whole vicious cycle in a lot of ways, and a lot of people suffer from it, and they don't really understand how to get out of it. I mean, it's a big factor with autism and things like that you just don't know how to get out of your situation, and you're expecting other people to come in and maybe talk to you and ask if you're okay, but nobody does. Does that hit home with anyone, or am I on my own?
Yep, I mean, I think that you touched on a lot of points that have definitely hit a lot of people really hard. Social isolation is tricky because it's a social issue. It's not something that we can just push a policy for to have it go away.
There is a loneliness minister, though.
Sorry?
There is a loneliness minister.
There is a loneliness minister. Yeah, I mean, maybe so, but it's like you're trying to use parliament power to change people's social behaviors. It just isn't the same compared to changing an institution's behaviors.
If you had bad experiences with people, you don't want to be associated with people if you had bad experiences in the past, so that could be a barrier.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, definitely. But the first thing I was just going to ask is why do we think that social isolation seems to be hitting men so much in such drastic numbers?
Men aren't sociable, so it's to a point. So they go to a pub and stuff, but that's about it. So men will socialize if there's a point to it. They just won't phone up and talk to people if they have nothing to say.
Yeah, it can be a lot like that. I think it's a two-way thing. I think that men don't reach out and people don't reach out to men. That's one of the things that the people pushing toxic masculinity and stuff don't really realize. This whole idea that men are isolated and on their own, it is very much multi-directional. It's everyone assuming you're okay and you assuming that nobody else wants to be bothered by you.
Yeah, it's nobody wants to make the first move.
Yeah. And you can be very scared of going and talking to people. I mean, I've been in situations where people can be quite vicious to you without even you saying anything. And you can just be sitting there and they'll just be really nasty to you for no reason. This was a big thing for me in secondary school and college. So coming out
secondary school and college as well.
Yeah.
I could be just sitting there and people just start on me for no reason. So.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very much that sort of thing. You come out of these situations where you were picked on a lot, and so there's a huge part of you that doesn't really want to get into another social situation, especially if you do get into another social situation and then you find the same sorts of people. You find people make comments about you. They're unpleasant to you. Why would you hang around with those people? I mean, I actually used to do archery for a while, but there was a guy there who was very unpleasant to me and he kind of ruined it for me. And so I left. And I didn't go back. And it's one of those sorts of things. You can end up, you're every time that happens, it can be another little, ball and chain attached to your legs, stopping you going out and talking to people. And another thing that's really, really, really doesn't get mentioned is that a lot of those balls and chains that you attach to yourself are very entertaining. YouTube, computer games, books, entertainment in general, all these really addictive things you can do in your own home. Add into that drugs like smoking pot and things like that. There was actually a very poignant anti-drugs advert, which was telling teenagers to get help. It was the Talk to Frank campaign, and I thought it was very well done. It was basically this guy sitting at home playing computer games and things like that, and he wants to go out and he wants to talk to his friends, and the pot and the drugs and the things like that, you know, they're saying, no, don't go out. You've got everything you want right here. You know, you can have all the fun you want just right here. And you don't have to go out. You don't have to talk to these people. And, you know, it's just this sort of spiral of not just addictions, but entertainments. And before you know it, you're 10 years older and you haven't spoken to anyone. And then it can happen again and again. And eventually you're, you know, an old man or woman and you're stuck in like your house, and you've never, you know, you haven't spoken to anyone in years, and you can die alone there, and people won't even notice until they smell you. Like, that is a very, very, very real thing that happens to way more people than it ought to, and it ought to happen to nobody.
And not even old too. I mean, you could be 18, 19, 20 and you're on the streets and you die of an overdose or you die of starvation, whatever it is. And if you're not someone who society considers important, and when you die, no one cares.
That's exactly true. There's, I mean, if you actually go out and you talk to the homeless people, they all know somebody who's died on the streets. They all
young,
do.
At a young age.
Yeah, usually, yeah. Often it's something like head trauma or drugs or something like that. I mean, not all of the homeless people are nice, and you have to pick your friends there, and you have to be very careful, because there is a bit of every man for himself, and it is every man usually. Like, there are female homeless, but they're a lot rarer, and they don't tend to stay out very long.
The concept of what a friend is when you're homeless is a strange, like, alien thing. But so I'm just trying to roll back on the points that have been made. So we mentioned that, you know, women and other people, like men as well, all seem to give more attention to women than men. Like, it's like men have to kind of somehow make more of an effort to involve themselves in order to get the same level of, like, social attention. And that this whole thing of, you know, social isolation is a two-way street, where a lot of men just aren't receiving the same levels of attention that, like, they would otherwise if they were a woman. So, I mean, that's a good point. And you mentioned entertainment being a problem, and I actually completely agree. I think that, you know, I love games, but they're marketed towards men, and they're a very entertaining, very addictive pastime. With, like, being isolated as a homeless person, which has been mentioned, you know, that's really difficult. I mean, people just don't empathize, don't talk to, don't care about the homeless. And I mentioned, you know, a friend is a strange concept, a bit more of a weird concept when you're homeless. Well, I mean, you know, one day someone's your friend, and then the next day they're, like, assaulting you to get something from you. Like, it's not like the human connection is, like, very different and, like, a very strange thing. It's a very, like, fragile thing a lot of the time. being autistic has been mentioned, and yeah, I mean, I think that the prescription of medications that make you focus more, like in school at a young age, that's often given to young boys. And sure, they start focusing on their like work a bit more, but they just stop socially interacting a lot of the time. I think that could be a factor in why, like, men aren't developing social skills, like a lot of them, and are then becoming socially isolated potentially.
The drugs are actually something I've heard cited as a major reason that boys are basically turning into what failure to launch syndrome. It's like they focus on the schoolwork and they focus on it, but the drugs do weird things to their brains, and the drugs like then they end up sort of coasting out of school. And there's talk of men will come out of school and then just be like, well, I've got nothing that I want there's nothing I want from the outside world, so I'll focus on computer games. And the really, Floxway, please mute your mic when you're not talking. The really, really dangerous thing about computer games is that they give you a false sense of achievement. That's something that, Floxoid, I'm going to mute you, sorry. You're... Right, tell me when you're ready to come back on in the chat. Okay, so basically, computer games give you a false sense of achievement, and you might not even realize that you're addicted to them, because you feel like you're achieving things, you feel like you're making progress. And it really takes something like your save files getting deleted and you starting back from square one to make you realize that the game is not actually real. You're not actually getting anything from it. You're not really building anything. Like even in Minecraft and things like that. I mean, you can invite people into your digital masterpiece and things like that, and they'll go, ooh, that's nice. But you haven't actually made anything real. You haven't done anything with your life. You've created a couple of megabytes of customized data that could be deleted in a moment, like just accidentally. It could be wiped away. And then what is your life's work? What have you accomplished? I think men are lacking this life's work that gives them purpose and gives them drive and gives them a reason to go out and talk to people. And it used to be that was work and family, but now they've realized that marriage is a bad deal for them, and the institution has become this sort of vague thing anyway. People are shifting away from it. And so computer games are filling that hole, and books and TV and things like that. I mean, it's not just computer games. You can get a false sense of accomplishment from a TV show because you can identify with the characters. You can almost feel like you're following along and you're doing things with them, and they're your friends. But they're not actually your friends. They're not real. And that's something which...
I would say that there's some pros to it, though, like in the sense that video games can be a great way for people who are quite introverted to make friends. And I know, like, your argument's going to be, or your point is that, people are becoming more introverted because they're playing video games. And I fully agree with you, but there's a part of me that thinks, though, like, before video games and before social media, if you happen to be a man or a boy or a girl or whatever who was introverted and had struggled to make friends, it was sort of tough luck, like you kind of just sit at home and you don't get to go out with your friends, you don't get to play with anyone. But for some people, the only sort of like, and I know like we really should encourage people to go out, but for some people, they get to meet people like them with the same interests and the same and people who like doing the same things they do online by doing it through video games, and I feel like without that, they wouldn't have that same sense of comfort that they would get from playing with these people that they mightn't have otherwise.
Well, I'm not discounting that, and I'm not discounting the ability to socialize in games. I mean, that is a good counter argument. There is. There are situations where you can actually become real life friends with people who you talk to on computer games and on the internet. My best friend I met on a forum a few years ago. Like, my absolute best friend in the world is somebody who I know from the internet. And yeah, I am not discounting that. I'm more talking about the idea of these getting involved in endless single player games and things like that. That's really what I'm thinking about.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, that is.
Yeah.
In defense of games, I would like to say that I think there's a lot that you can take personally from them. As with any story, you can learn morals, you can learn little bits of knowledge. I don't think there's something intrinsically valuable about just completing things and getting some kind of achievement, but what you take away from something personally does matter.
I'm not saying games are totally bad.
Yeah, I know you're not saying games are totally bad, but I think that being that we're having this conversation, there is some cause to jump to the defense a little bit. So I will say, for example, I know people that really struggle with being actionable, and playing StarCraft 2 for them has helped them a lot because they have to deal with suboptimal conditions and not be a perfectionist and just make the best of a bad situation all the time. For me, playing 15-second matches of chess online has helped me a lot with coping with anxiety, actually. So there are lots of good things, lots of good takeaways from games. I don't want to knock them, but I think that Men Are Human's point is completely valid, that oftentimes they're designed to be addictive, and designed to keep you playing and not doing other things, not developing hobbies and skills and socializing as much as possible. And the other thing I would bring up is it's kind of, if you've been, playing League for 7 years, right? You're not going to have anything to talk about when you try to socially interact, versus if you're pursuing hobbies, if you're even watching movies, you could talk about that. If you were going hiking, that's something. I know that's it's kind of comparing a motivated person to an unmotivated person there. But if someone was going hiking, they could talk about that, and it's something that they could even do with another person. So there are definitely problems with video games, and I think the fact that they're marketed to men so much is maybe one of the factors of why men are so socially isolated today in such large numbers.
Yeah, I'm not going to discount that books came before computer games, and they are a similar thing, and so on. But it's that addiction on your own element that I'm aiming at. And one thing we haven't mentioned is porn. Porn is that in spades. You can make arguments that computer games can help you socialize and things like that. I can't see how porn would let you do that, but it is one of the most addictive things on the planet. And I think people, they underestimate how addictive it is and how young people are encountering it now. Porn is being shared by basically primary school kids now. So it's kind of it's one of the most, it has the potential to isolate you completely. And a big part of that is that if you're looking at porn all the time, it kills your motivation.
Yeah,
Like
it's an addiction to dopamine
yeah,
you get from.
you, the main thing I'm getting at here is that if you find a way to artificially give yourself a sense of achievement and satisfaction and so on, you can go down a rabbit hole where you never come out. And it can take you, even if you realize it can take you years of your life to dig your way out. I mean, my big one was computer games, but I have seen porn destroy people, just outright destroy them.
So you're right that it can impact your motivation if you're, constantly jerking off like any time that you're like wanting to feel good. And it's going to make it to a point where you almost can't bring yourself to face situations that aren't going to make you feel good. Like there isn't that anticipation of a reward. So that's definitely true. And there's definitely people that become massively addicted, and that is definitely a problem. You mentioned that you can't, there's no way that you can socially interact with porn. I don't fully agree. There are a few ways. Like,
Have you seen the comment section?
oh, the comment section.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, pretty funny jokes in there, but that's
Yeah.
not what I was talking about.
Ah.
Yeah, I mean, people end up having like fetishes and kinks from porn, and there is like a kink and fetish community, and some people do, get involved in those groups as a result of porn. So you can, but it's not the typical result. I think that we can generally agree that porn is probably quite harmful to social isolation, or like porn in excessive consumption is harmful.
I think so. I think it is incredibly harmful. If there was no porn in the world, I think it would be a better world. If we can minimize it, then that's a good thing.
I don't know, because it's like if there was no video pornography, there would be other forms of pornography that people would engage in.
But I meant both video and photographic and all that sort of stuff.
Well, sure, but even if there was no published photographs, like people would be, selling like literal photographs, literal Polaroids to each other,
Yeah.
Like,
well, I understand that, but what I'm getting at is if we could get rid of it totally, it would be a good thing, but we can't. If we could minimize it and we can minimize the amount that people consume, then that would be a good thing. If you're using it more than if you're using it in any it's difficult to talk about without being extremely rude, but we just should get people to realize that it's kind of a hole for money and time, and it's not really any good for you mentally. Like, it can screw you up your head. And
it's absolutely not a good thing to try and force people to do anything. So I would totally disagree with any kind of notion to limit or ban personal freedoms when it comes to something like pornography or basically most other things.
I think Ben.
I'm not talking about a ban. I'm talking about a campaign.
I think what he sort of more means is spreading awareness of the damages that it does from watching it, to sort of discourage people to do it rather than force them. So to sort of say, you can watch porn if you want, but here are the disadvantages of porn. I suppose it could be a bit like cigarettes. Like, I know it's not the same, but I suppose you could be like, we're not going to stop you from going to buy a pack of cigarettes, but you should know the health disadvantages if you do happen to go off and buy it.
I think maybe some specialist mental health support for people who are like severely addicted could be beneficial.
Yeah, we also need to find a way to make it easier for people to seek that help, because I really don't think that most people are going to want to try and get help for porn addiction.
I mean, I
It's the
I
kind of
don't
thing you
think
don't
that
really.
I think that there already are. I mean, there are porn addiction centers and things like that. There are places that are dedicated to things like that.
I think
So
no.
it's not like they don't exist.
I've been told that NoFap, the Reddit community, is basically that. It's like you get yourself clean from porn sort of thing. Although some people take it to extremes. I like everything, and I don't think it's probably healthy for that either. But
Men Are Human, out of curiosity, what would you regard as like a worthwhile achievement? Because you were talking about like false achievement, and like, would you agree that there would be smaller forms of achievement which are beneficial? Because you
yeah,
were talking
yeah.
like, could you
If
give me, like, if you can, an example of like an achievement on the smaller scale, that you would regard as a non sort of false achievement? Makes sense.
learning to whittle, learning to make things, learning woodwork, pottery, having a hobby, learning to weave, having a family,
Okay.
being successful at your
sorts.
job, anything real, even making a computer game. Like making a computer game would be an achievement.
Would you say the sort of I suppose enjoyment that you would get with as playing with your friends and socializing with your friends, would you regard that as an achievement? Like, if being able to talk to your friends and make new friends is an achievement, would you regard that as a similar thing when related to video games?
If it if you're building real friends online who you know a lot more, as well as a friend who you have in real life, then
Yeah.
sure, you can build communities online. I mean, it would be healthy if you met face to face as well. I mean, as long as
Yeah,
they
no,
don't
I get
turn
what
out
you're
to be crazy. The thing I'm really talking about is sinking into this cycle of playing computer games for all of your free time,
Yeah,
and making that your life, and your life's goal is to
yeah,
like get the top ranks on Warhammer or something, or
yeah. I
Warcraft.
suppose becoming addicted to the sense of achievement of playing video games, I guess. Like,
Yeah,
personally, I don't think there's much wrong with playing. Like, I personally play around. I play like an hour or two during the weekend. That's about it.
yeah,
During the week, I'm doing school and stuff. But
that's a
I
healthy
think,
amount.
yeah, yeah, I get what you're saying. If you're becoming self-absorbed with the achievement of video games, and that's like all you've set yourself about doing in life, then yeah, that's definitely to tackle.
Yeah, computer games can have positive mental effects. They can improve your hand-eye coordination and so on. It's just like excess. Everything you can do in excess, and the excess is the bad thing, not the thing itself. We need to separate that. I mean, it's like if you think about the like 7 deadly sins, like gluttony is eating in excess, but food itself is good. Like eating in moderation is good. Sharing food with people is good. Occasionally going a little bit overboard with like a fancy dinner for Christmas, that's good. It's the when you are eating like 3 trays of fast food for lunch and things like that. That's when it's bad. It's like, that's an extreme example, but it's like you become addicted to the salt and sugar and the fat and the other chemicals in it, and you while your waistline expands in other ways you waste away, like mentally.
I think self-discipline is a very important thing with those
Yeah.
types of things. It's important to be. I think self-discipline is something that I think is. I don't know how to say it, like, because sort of self-discipline for me was kind of forced on. I personally, I'm very thankful for it now because like obviously I'm not perfect with discipline or anything. There's times where like I could discipline myself a lot better, but I'm just saying it is very helpful, especially with regard to games and stuff and certain things which can damage you in excess, that you have people to tell you hold on, maybe it could be a bit bad if you go overboard, or
Yeah.
you know what I mean.
Yeah. Self-discipline is an amazing skill. It's very undervalued. It's the one of the people like I saw a study a while ago that suggests that one of the signs of intelligence is being able to defer gratification. And I think you're playing a healthy amount of computer games, like on the weekends. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You can play computer games like in moderation. I mean, I was playing Eye of Beholder today. I've played Oxygen Not Included a little while ago and failed miserably at it. And yeah, it's a little bit of it is good. Like I like to use it as a reward for like doing well with other things that are more that are giving me actual achievements.
So I think we can all agree that like video games are especially addictive, and like maybe that's something to challenge, is the actual design of video games being less addictive would be positive. Is there any ways that we could potentially, hypothetically, is there any ways that porn could be less addictive?
I don't think so. You'd have to limit people's availability to it.
Well, these things are like the same with cigarettes or whatever. Like these companies, they don't care how much damage it does because it's putting money in their pocket. What we do need, I think the best way to do with anything is just for things like this, especially when it comes to video games and porn, is to just to educate people. So you can, just make sure that people are aware of the benefits and the disadvantages. So like just making people aware that, oh, video games are cool. It's great that you play video games. I just think that you should also make sure that you have hobbies and preoccupy yourself with things that, bring real life value.
Well, here's one example of action that I've just thought of at the top of my head of action that could be taken to help, limit how people engage with games that isn't encroaching on people's freedoms, is you could categorize certain forms of game design as more addictive or less addictive, right? Or you could, maybe look at the average like playtime of certain kinds of games, like as in when they're first released for the first week, you just measure how many hours someone puts in, and then you could rank them. Like there could be a government ranking of like games that are more or less addictive, and that could just be taken as a negative if it's more addictive.
Well,
you have to be careful of that.
I know, for example, China have this thing where the systems automatically notify people how long they've been playing. So it will say stuff like, you've been playing for an hour, maybe take a 10-minute break or something. Like
there are games that do that.
Is there? I haven't seen any games. I've only seen it. I only know that it's in some gaming competitions in China.
Well, I mean, that's a bit. That's probably one of those tyrannical government mandated things. But if a company does that on their own,
I know it's not the best thing to base off, but you know what I mean.
I don't mean like ban the most addictive games. I just mean have a thing that says what are the most addictive games, and then people make an informed choice where they're like, I want to spend a lot of time on that game, and I'll go for it. No one did it, so do that.
Because
sorry.
That would be sort of hard, I think, to facilitate because, like obviously, like businesses like Activision or any of those ones who make the big games like Call of Duty or Ubisoft who make games, Assassin's Creed. I doubt they're gonna, do anything that's gonna even remotely damage their marketed brand. So it would have to be something outside of there, like some sort of company that looks at these games and then deciphers whether or not they're addicting or not. Because I doubt these.
Yeah, it would have to be some external organization for sure. We could never rely on video game companies or porn companies, for that matter, to make any kind of move to get people to stop using it as much.
That's true.
Obviously.
Well,
Yeah,
you
it's not a
can
bad idea.
ban certain types of things that people, that you can put in games, like loot boxes, paid loot boxes,
Yeah.
and things like that. Paying for
I-
in-game items and things.
I
This
think it
sort
was
of thing
FIFA
is.
who.
Well, those are banned because it's kind of like a form of gambling, not because of any
Yeah, I
kind
was
of
about to say.
addiction.
I think it was
Yeah,
EA
well,
who got
gambling
in a
is
lot of
addictive.
trouble for that because they had people under the age of like 12 who were essentially gambling with soccer.
It'd be very difficult to really regulate it because the thing that really is addictive isn't so much the loot boxes as what they represent. It's this idea of gambling, and it's making numbers go up, and it's getting items that have prestige attached to them. For example, to pick the most banal example, party hats in RuneScape are considered like legendary items and things like that because they're so rare, and some of them are like only were given out like once for one event in one place and 1 year, and so they have a scarcity value.
Out of
And,
curiosity, would you say that like video gaming items, because like that is something, when you think about it, it sounds quite stupid. Like when you see someone find a very rare item in a video game, an item that isn't really real, and they're getting very excited about it, and it makes you think that these people are getting excited over essentially what is a bit of code. But would you say that that's just the same as really anything, a lot of things that are valuable, certain baseball cards, like Pokemon cards, or even
well, thanks for screaming in my ear. Yeah, some things are like that. I think that value is very subjective. I mean, gold doesn't actually have any real value except as like this material you can use in computers and things like that.
If you're going to make that argument, you may as well say that nothing has value apart from your knowledge and experiences. Yeah, because you're saying that gold has no value, but it's the value we put on it, like any object in the real world.
I wasn't finished. I was going to say something very similar to that. It's like value is inherent in value is what we put upon an object. And it can be because we can use it for certain things, like I said, gold with computers, and we can, it has value as a decorative thing. But we can put too much value, like we can overvalue certain things, like those bits of code on a computer which don't really help us or anything like that. I mean,
Sorry, then it just didn't seem like it was going in that direction.
Well, my arguments often have an end piece where I basically, I'll often talk about like the way the inherent like value of the thing itself, and then I'll walk it back and explain that there are counter arguments to that. I mean, that's how I prefer to talk. I will usually hedge things a bit.
Yeah,
like I'm not saying that gold has no value.
Before he was done, in fairness.
You did shout over me quite loudly, and I didn't get to finish what I was saying. I mean, I was literally about to start saying that the value really has a lot to do with what you get out of it. Like, for example, that object you have online, it could be something of a prestige item which you walk around with like a piece of jewelry, and you get enjoyment from people seeing it and saying, "Hey, nice legendary sword of the goblin slaying or whatever." But it's when people start. I mean, there's cases of people. At least one case of somebody tracking down and killing someone because they stole like a legendary sword off them on World of Warcraft. It's you've got to have a realistic assessment of the value of the objects, and there's a lot of. It's very easy to overvalue something because there's artificial scarcity. I mean, if you could hack World of Warcraft, you could take the most valuable, unique item in the entire game, and you could give it to every single player, and then you could duplicate it all over the server until the server actually crashed because there were so many of them. Worth is a very complicated thing. I mean, one of the things I often talk about is like pineapples used to be worth thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds because they were like imported specially, but now we get them in cans.
On this computer games thing, what about simulators? So flight sims and things like that.
It depends. I mean, some people get a lot of. I mean, it can be like cheaper flight lessons, and you can actually learn how to pilot a plane, and then you can go and learn like how to pilot a real plane. Pardon me, much more easily because you've had experience in a flight simulator. Like I've heard of people, them taking people who've like experts in flight simulators, putting them in a real plane, and they can actually fly the plane, although they seem to have trouble with landing and things like that, which are very hard to simulate, like the feeling of landing, which is something which is much more important in a small plane, for example, with fewer instruments.
I think that unless you're going to actually fly a plane and that's your goal, then flight simulators unless you're going to become like a trucker, trucker simulators, then at that point it is just entertainment. I don't think there's anything wrong with entertainment, but if you're spending, your entire life on entertainment that's not leading to anything that helps you in other aspects of life, then that is on me for sure.
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, excess, that's the real killer in almost everything is excess.
When you're saying... Go on.
Sorry, I was just saying about the person that I currently live with. I've got her into truck driving simulator because she's always wanted to drive, and for various reasons she can't do it. So she's gotten into this partly to get some kind of understanding of what my professional life is like, but also it gives her the opportunity to do something that she wouldn't be able to do in real life, which is to drive. And I reckon that if I put her in the truck and told her to drive it down the road, she could do it because of that simulator.
Well, that's pretty interesting. So it's pretty accurate then.
It's not inaccurate. I'll put it like that. You don't get an idea of all of the sensations, but you can learn to, say, reverse the truck. So, what you do at the front wheels of the tractor unit is not mirrored by what happens at the back of the trailer, for example. It goes in the opposite direction. But you can also learn certain traffic rules and how to negotiate a roundabout properly. So, potentially, if she wanted to go and learn to drive, and the doctors cleared her to learn to drive, she would have an idea of what to do before ever getting into a real car.
Well, that's pretty useful. I mean, maybe we should be encouraging people to get into realistic driving simulators as a cheaper way to learn how to drive before they get any lessons. So,
The other thing is, have people heard of competitions like Nissan GT Academy on the PlayStation? Where
what, sorry?
Nissan GT Academy. So, Gran Turismo.
Oh, right. So, like driving, racing games.
Yeah, but what they did, they put competitions on every year, and I think they still do it. And you go through the competition on the game, and then it converts into real life. And several people have gone on to be full-time professional racing drivers with Nissan, competing at events such as the Le Mans 24 Hours and what have you. And one of them was from Cardiff, a young lad by the name of Jan Mardenborough. I met him a few years ago. So, if more simulation-based games rather than fantasy-based games are actually better for developing some skills.
That is interesting. I mean, I've heard of them using like Rainbow Six in the army. Like they've got a special version of it that they use to train people in cover-based shooting and things like that, and like clearing rooms. And it's like it's not super totally accurate, but it gives you an idea of it gives you an idea that helps you, like, that you can push into like real life, and you can like use in real combat, like you can understand what things are going to stop a bullet so that you can hide behind and what things aren't. But I mean, I'm not really, like I said, I'm not against computer games. I play them myself, but it's like addiction and knowing where the limits are. And I feel like a good experience for every gamer is to get to almost the final boss on a computer game they're absolutely obsessed with, and then have their save file completely deleted irreparably, so that they have to start again, and have them start again and feel and realize that there is no actual real accomplishment in this. You're just running through they are simulations, even if they're not realistic simulations. You're having a simulated experience that doesn't translate into any gain in your real life. And I feel like people do need to think about what legacy they're going to leave behind. And that does need, people do need to well, what am I going to leave behind? What is my mark on the world? And what mark has the world had on me? What memories have I got of the world? Have I gone out and have I seen things and done things and experienced things? Or have I sat at home and, sat at the computer all day, sat in front of the TV with a joystick, watched movies all day, watched books until I ran out of life to live? I mean, what are you going to do? What's your choice there? And I find that people really do what they actually want to. Like, if somebody might say that they want to go out and see the world, but if you survey their actual life, it looks an awful lot like they don't. Like they actually just want to stay home and play computer games. And that is probably because it's easier.
What I was going to say earlier was that it really depends what gives an individual person their enjoyment. Now, this could be something very simple, like a game like we've been talking about, or it could be, forging more long-term relationships with people, having something to look back on, as you mentioned. But the purpose of life shouldn't be what your version of achievement is. It's what that person's version of achievement is and what makes them happy in their life. And I think that's pretty different for everyone. I think the main purpose of life for everyone should be that they get to enjoy it and live a good and happy life.
I mean, I can certainly understand that, but I feel that people really should, at the very least, try to put themselves in a position where they question if computer games and movies and things like that are really what they want to do with their life, because there will come a time in their future where they will go and they will look back on their life, and they may have positive memories and things from all these computer games and so on and so forth, but they may also have extreme regrets that they spent their life on this thing, and they may feel like they've completely wasted their life and their potential, and that they could have achieved something good in the world. They could have made a name for themselves. They could have helped people. They could have done something that was really valuable, but instead they used up their time on entertainments and things like that. It's just something that you really ought to think about. Is it something that you're doing because you enjoy it and because it's the thing you really want to do with your life and you don't want other things? Or have you convinced yourself that you really want to do it because you're addicted to it? That is a question that's really got to be asked. And I think that does play a lot into isolation, because when the computer game stops, when the film switches off, when you run out of season 28 of whatever it is, and you're at home in the dark, and you realize that you've got nobody, then you've really got to think to yourself, am I doing what's best for me? Am I going to the extreme? Am I consuming entertainment in moderation? Am I going online and finding friends there? Or am I wasting my life on something frivolous which doesn't give me any gain, but is really just a huge time sink? And you should also think to yourself, is there anything I can do for the world which would make it better, which I'm not doing? And you should think maybe that, even if you don't particularly enjoy that thing, maybe you should do it anyway, because maybe it has inherent value, is greater and more important than whether you enjoy it or not.
Speaking of isolation, I go into a very mild form of isolation for 5 days a week with my job. And quite a lot of the people that do this job do it because they like being on their own.
Well, yeah. For some people, it's good. I mean, people go off and they become fire watchers out in the middle of nowhere because they enjoy being on their own, and the only company being like the birds and the bees and so on. And they're perfectly happy in of themselves. But there's a difference between that and isolation. Isolation is a crushing thing that gnaws at your sanity and gnaws at your sense of self, and it cuts away at you bit by bit until you feel like the entire world is this cold and barren place, and here's your little island and you're trapped in your little cell, and there's nothing for you in the world, and the world is going on without you. And across the gulf of your isolation, out there somewhere, people are having fun and people are enjoying themselves and accomplishing things, and they're building rockets to go to Mars and things like that, and you're not a part of that. And if you vanished, there would be nothing left of you. There would be no trace of you left behind, and nobody would even notice. That is what isolation is when you get down to it. It's that feeling that you could vanish and that nobody would notice or care.
I mean, maybe this is a really good point, actually, that one of the factors that causes men to be socially isolated more often is that they're just working like longer hours, more hours, less opportunity to socialize, more difficult to maintain friendships.
Yeah, that's certainly a thing. I mean, even if you're in a place where there's loads and loads of people and you're absolutely surrounded by them, that doesn't mean you like any of them or you actually associate with any of them.
Yeah, and there's a huge difference between co-workers and friends. Even if you all get on really well, it's different, if you both know that you're not really ever going to support each other almost, or that if it wasn't for work, you wouldn't hang out.
Yeah. I think this is the reason really that they have office parties and things like that. It's an attempt to sort of corral these people who feel lonely and isolated and give them something, a social event where they can feel like they have friends. I don't think it works very well most of the time, but I do think there is a genuine attempt there to try and build a community.
So I want to go back to a point that I mentioned in passing, which was young boys especially being medicated and then not socially interacting with their formative years and not stunting their social development to an extent. I think that it is medicating boys is a huge crisis. I think that it's actually really damaging what's happening. One study, I'll have to find the source, but one study that I've seen is to do with basically
school shooting.
The more populated a classroom is, the more children there is in a classroom, the more likely, disproportionate to the size of the classroom, it is that boys will be diagnosed with a learning difficulty, like ADHD.
Yeah, I can believe that.
And of course, it makes sense because, if you're a teacher and you've got 60 students, which is ridiculous, the span of attention has to be, the kids have to be paying attention when they're interacting with the teacher, or it's screwed. There's no personal interaction whatsoever. What is an acceptable attention span decreases with the size of the classroom. But just that example shows that boys are being diagnosed with these learning difficulties when it's not actually a result of their behavior, and then often they're being medicated in ways that causes them to be socially isolated during their formative years,
I think that most medications happen because boys are rambunctious. They want to run around, but they're being forced into these little hard plastic chairs that aren't very comfortable in these classrooms that are very stuffy and not very well ventilated and full of people, and they're all on their own in this crowd of people, and the only way to really make excitement or get attention is to act out and be bad and to run around and throw books and stuff like that. And even when you get to secondary school, it's the only entertainment there is to bully someone or something like that when the teacher's back is turned, to throw a sharpener at their head or something. Or, yeah.
So I don't know what everyone else's experience is, but for me, when I went from primary school to secondary school, most of the people in secondary school were from my primary school. Not most of them, but a lot of them, especially in my year group. So my reputation for not socially interacting followed me from primary school to secondary school, which, by the way, I was medicated with Ritalin and stuff, and I do think that was a factor in that. So it does. I mean, it's almost causing a situation where for the first 16 years of your life in the UK, and I guess 18 in the US, because high school goes on till 18, right? That you're having somewhat negative, not negative, but either less social interaction or negative social interaction.
Yeah, if you're a bit shy, a bit quiet, and you don't really interact with people, the bullies will pick up on that and they will zero in on you and they will make you interact with them in the most negative way possible. I mean, at least that's what I've found. The more you shrink into the background, the more they notice. I mean, and that can have lifelong impact. And I don't think the bullies even realize that. Bullying does cause suicide.
Yep.
I mean, it can toughen you up as well, but it can also send you the other way, and it can destroy you.
Even sometimes they think that they're just teasing and messing about, but actually it's having quite an impact on the person. But sometimes they're genuinely not aware of that as well. So, I mean, I think it's good that schools have been cracking down on bullying. I think the ways that they've been doing it is kind of sketchy. M. Painter, I think, brought up in one of the other Friday talks that boys who have bruises on their face are being punished because it's evidence that they've been fighting. And it's well, no, it's evidence that they've been hit. Come on.
Or that they're clumsy.
Potentially.
I mean, yeah. Is somebody echoing there? Yeah, it's, I used to fall over a lot. And I had bruises and scrapes all the time. And are they still running that zero tolerance thing, which basically means that if you punch someone in the face, they go to detention?
I don't know. It all sounds sketch as fuck right now, if I'm being honest. There's been a whole, in the particular secondary school that my little sister is going to, there's been a whole thing of snitches get L7s, which is a detention. And it's that sounds fucked up.
What, really?
Yep. Straight up, the teachers saying
don't. An example?
Just straight up, even the principal saying for sort of, and I don't know. I don't know how they're gonna learn to deal with conflict if they're not allowed to, settle it themselves, but then they're not allowed to bring a mediator in to deal with that. So that could be a completely out there example. I don't know how schools are currently.
I have a distinct memory of when I was in primary school, and when I think about it, I honestly think of how ridiculously stupid. I remember one time, I had this guy who used to bully me a lot in primary school. Anytime I'd retaliate, if I'd push him back or I'd, try to protect myself, he would tell on me and I'd get in trouble when I was in. And I remember this one time I wrote a note on a piece of paper and left it somewhere so that a teacher would find it, and she found it and she gave out to me. I remember she took me after class and she physically gave out to me. She brought the entire class up and she said, "One of you has written a note about another student." And I didn't say anything. Literally, I said something down the lines of, "This guy's been being mean to me," or whatever. And I wrote a paragraph about something down the lines of, "I don't think bullying is ever going to get him anywhere in real life because, bullying is not tolerated outside of places like this." And I got punished for it. And it's something I did. It's a very, my school now, my secondary school, I'm coming up to of secondary. This school is, I think, attack it very well. My school do it quite well, but in primary school, it's very.
You're cutting out a lot. Could you quit and rejoin? It might help.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah.
for me, like my primary school was really good with tackling bullying, but then my secondary school was complete trash.
My primary school was very good as well, and my secondary school was really bad. So maybe we had the same schools.
Is it
Yeah.
is it any better now? Or is it
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Should I repeat it, or did you get most?
I think we got most of the gist of it. You wrote a paragraph about this kid who was bullying you as an attempt to basically tell the teacher, and the teacher punished you instead. Did you get detention or something?
I don't think I got detention. I remember I got a write up, and then she gave me because detention wasn't a thing. It was in primary school. You couldn't really get detention but I remember I got given out to, and that was the first time I ever, felt like I had the balls to actually, um, build up the courage to actually speak to someone about it, even if it was just leaving it. And I never spoke up about it again. And that was when I was maybe 11
You're
or 10.
cutting out
I
again.
spent another 3 years in primary school and dealt with it.
So, okay, let me get this straight. You wrote a paragraph outing another kid for something bad they did. So the teacher wrote a paragraph outing you for something bad that she presumed that you did.
I think the specific method was that bullies always lose. I said something like that when on a piece of paper, and I left it near his desk so he would read it, and so would the teacher. And he gave it up to the teacher. And it also didn't help that I think it was his father at the time was the janitor in the area. But I remember it still blows my mind that I got in trouble for it, but I did get in trouble for it.
I
don't think
it might
that
be a bit more extreme, but
not that what's not being talked about isn't important. And that situation was awful. I don't think that's really what's referred to as zero tolerance, though. What I know as the zero tolerance stuff is basically if someone's attacking you and you attack back, you both get the same punishment, even though you're defending yourself.
Well, what I've heard is that if you get attacked, then both of you go into detention for fighting, and there's no need to prove that you actually hit back at all. That's the one that I've heard, because I've heard multiple stories of people using this to bully people. Basically, you've got a whole group of people ganging up on one person, and they all hit that person in the face as they're going down the corridor. And every time they hit that person, it's another person hitting them. So even if they get in detention for it, the person they're hitting gets in detention as well. So the person they're hitting gets into detention after detention after detention, while they only get into one. I mean, this was actually used to fight back against a bully in one of the stories, but other people have told me that, you can, just use it to get people into trouble. One detention is nothing, but detention every single day repeatedly is a lot, and you can end up suspended. And
yeah,
I do think bullying. Go on, sorry.
Sorry, I was gonna say, they have this sort of, I suppose that they push to, discourage violence, but I don't think they fully. I remember one time, one of my friends got into a fight, and this guy had cornered him, and he was, pushing him around, so he defended himself. And I remember a teacher telling him that he should have gone to the teacher, and he couldn't do. So she punished both of them because he should have gone to the teacher, but instead he chose to retaliate. But he was, he was backed up into a corner. He had nowhere to go. The only choice he had was to defend himself. And I feel like defending yourself is also to set a bit of more of an example that you shouldn't be one for others to take advantage of, to bully. And they sort of prioritize just violence itself, and the sort of idea that violence is bad over the fact that sometimes violence might be the only option.
Yeah, they don't really understand that. And I've noticed that I think basically every school is a zero tolerance school, because I've been punched in the face and gotten detention for it, even though I wasn't actually doing anything. and I've gotten like teachers saying, "Oh, you two are fighting. You should shake hands and make up." And it was actually them picking on me. And I've had to shake hands with a bully, and that's something which I still get angry about, even like years later.
I mean,
That is
I
quite.
don't think this is going to happen, but I think that the only real solution to take it all more seriously is, number one, to have CCTV in the schools. Obviously, not in areas where any students are changing or anything. Just, in public areas that actually cover all the school. There's no blind spots in, and to treat it more seriously, get the police involved. When you get to high school, there's no doubt in anyone's mind what they're doing is wrong when they bully someone. They know. They need to take it more seriously by actually getting the police involved and putting them in juvie or something like that, because they can't be allowed to continue doing it. The schools just do not do enough to stop it.
I think there's a point where you can get the police involved. I do think that in America, especially, there is like this instant reaction of using the police to enforce discipline in the schools. And I've seen some quite brutal videos of kids just sitting there, and the police come along and they take that kid down like they're a murderer. And the police really aren't trained for that. So you've got to be very sure that what you want is the police when you do that. But I do think that if there's somebody who is assaulting like a younger kid or something like that over and over and over and over again, there does come a point where pressing criminal charges might be an option. It's very context dependent.
Well, like my school recently, like we got like people were complaining, and some people got their parents to come about this sort of zero tolerance thing. And although they still do fail to comprehend that sometimes you have to defend yourself in violent situations, they have done this one strategy which I don't see as much in other schools, but I have seen it to be quite effective in my school. What they do is they release these bully papers, these bully page things, and they're anonymous, and everyone has to do one, and you can write down whether or not you are currently being bullied or whether someone else is being bullied, and everyone puts them in a box, and they take the box and they read them. And what they do is they'll find the student when they're somewhere where they can, like, let's say it's a bully, they'll find a time where they can take them away somewhere, um where it doesn't look like they've come in and someone's told on them. They'll say something like, "Oh, Johnny, could you please deliver this letter to another teacher?" And when they get there, the teacher will sit them down and they'll say, "Hey, listen, I'm going to give you a strike because we've been getting reports that you've been bullying this guy." Or it's not even reports. They would say, "Oh, we've seen ourselves that you've been bullying this guy, and we're going to assume that you're innocent because you might just think it's a joke, but this is people are seeing bad effects happening on people because of this type of behavior, and we'd ask you to stop." And they sort of, the first strike that they give is a sort of assumed to be innocent. So they assume that they were just messing around and didn't realize the damage that it was doing. And then, second strike, third strike, and it gets more severe of a punishment. Continues. But I've seen like I've seen that done quite well. Like I remember there was this guy in my year, and someone put his name up, and they took the people who were bullying him, and they mentioned it, and it stopped. Like one of them kept doing it, and I don't think he's in the school anymore, but the other stopped. So I do think it's not a bad way of dealing with bullying.
Yeah, if you did that right, it could be good, but it could also be misused as a method of bullying if the kids were clever about it. Like you can get your friend to report like this kid you're bullying with them, and then it becomes a whole situation. Yeah.
It's been exploited. Has been exploited in my school. I fully agree. People take advantage of it, but I have also seen it work quite well. Like it's not the best system, but it is a system better than the whole zero tolerance. And we still have the zero tolerance, but it's definitely to what it was.
Oh yeah, everything's better than zero tolerance. It's like zero tolerance is the worst system I've ever seen in a school. Well, actually, except for what I think it was not mentioned, that system of punishing people for telling on bullies. I don't understand that system. Why is that system there? What is their rationale for
that? I don't know. It's not for bullying specifically. It's just generally. I think that it's to stop people from just whinging to teachers constantly about pointless shit, and it's to, get them to develop the skills of dealing with things themselves. But to me, it seems completely illogical and ridiculous. I'm looking into it now. I've only heard about this recently-ish.
The reasons I think it's for is, number one, because they don't want to deal with it, as you say, and number two, because they don't have the resources to deal with it at all. I mean, if you're putting everyone in detention for things like this and assigning counsellors, that requires a certain extra budget to the public fund, and you need to get teachers to stay on after hours in order to sit in on them.
Yeah, I don't think it's a very good idea. I think that if I had been the focus of a system like that when I was in secondary school, I probably would have stabbed a guy. Several guys, probably. But I'm not joking. But I think that if you went to your local paper or something like that and told them about it, then it would probably end that system quite quickly.
Thinking about it, like I've got to, you have to go through the motions of trying internal change before you do external change, or before you put external pressure on them. Because if they say like, no, we have this system for these reasons, and then I can evidence that they've said that makes my case stronger. But yeah, I'm definitely considering taking it on because it is. I don't know, it just sounds kind of backwards and fucked up. So, I mean, I feel like for the most part, we've mapped out most of the reasons why men become isolated more than women, unless anyone has any more. But then what are some potential solutions? I wrote a summary in voice discussions. What are some solutions? One thing, about 10 years ago, there used to be a lot more community centres and a lot more youth clubs. And maybe bringing something like that back could help a lot.
Male-only spaces. At the end of the day, that's what everything comes down to.
I agree. Giving male-only and age-appropriate as well. Mentor systems as well, after-school programs. All these sorts of things are known to cut crime and they're known to increase community and things like that, but they're not PC. Well, the after-school programs are very PC, but the male-only clubs and things like that are not PC because, we all know the reasons, I think. But I think that giving men a way out of addiction and a way into something which is valuable, and giving them ways to find a partner, giving them ways to, pursue what they want to do. These are all really good things that would cut crime and would increase community and would prevent loneliness and isolation and so on. Mental health services are good. I should have mentioned way earlier, but one really good thing you can get into is if you talk to your doctor, there are all kinds of volunteer groups associated with mental health, and they can set you up with people who will phone you every week. You can even get multiple people to talk to you more often.
Really?
Pardon?
Really? That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Who would I have to contact to start that up?
If you're in England, then the NHS mental health team is your best bet. You can also go directly to people. I think the Shaw Trust is one. You can actually get, you can talk to charities where they'll set you up with somebody. If you have a mental illness or something like that, they'll set you up with somebody who also has a mental illness. And that's actually a lot more helpful than you might think, because there's a lot of common ground, and you can talk about, they can talk about their stuff, you can talk about your stuff, and you can work out together what you both want in your life and how to get it, and you can encourage each other. It's really, really good.
Yeah, I mean, I think any sort of clubs, any sort of extracurricular activities, any sort of youth centres would be a great improvement, because especially in the UK, I don't know if this is widespread or if it's just in my city, they've just disappeared almost completely. Like there used to be like 4 community centres and literally everyone is closed down, there used to be all kinds of like social clubs and little things going on that just don't exist anymore. I mean, you brought up the like need for some spaces that are like male only, and I don't know, in my experience, like most of the spaces have been like female and male, so I don't personally understand the need. Maybe you can clarify a bit on that.
Have you ever heard of an organisation called Men's Sheds?
Called what?
Nope.
Men's Sheds.
Oh, men's sheds. Yeah. Later in life. Isn't that for people who are sort of like, over 16?
No, you can sign up.
Not anymore.
Whenever you
no,
want.
that's sort of how it started. But basically, it's a thing. It started in Australia, and it was a place for men to go who were widowers, ex-services, suffer with mental health issues, all of that stuff. And what they found was the mental health outcomes for those men improved dramatically when they became involved with the Men's Sheds program. So they would go in there, say as a guy who was a victim of domestic violence, go in there, there's no pressure for you to talk about your experiences or anything like that, and they would just give them a block of wood and some tools. And if they were new, after a little while, the rest of the guys would start coming in and helping out. And they'd start conversations, and eventually, whatever the issues that they had going on at the time would start coming out. So they would start building a support network through Men's Sheds. That's the reason we need more men's only spaces. It's really simple.
Yeah, so I'm on board with, especially for older men, especially for like adults, because of the negative experiences they could have had with women, like you're saying, domestic abuse. And I've heard that any sort of program which is a man doing something, even if it's not focused on mental health, like tends to have better outcomes than talking therapies. So, engaging in those masculine, learning to craft and all of that sort of stuff is definitely great,
Yeah, it's a really good idea. It's how men actually talk about things. It's the male version of talking therapy. Is you go and you get a block of wood and you carve it with other men, or you do metal work, or you go out into the woods and you camp and you stare at a campfire, and occasionally somebody says something profound about life. That's really how men work. It's they need to be doing something, because men are focused on doing stuff.
Are men's sheds do they get public funding? Any public funding at all, or is it all like through donations and volunteers?
I doubt
I
there's a lot of
believe
public
it's
funding.
yeah. I was say I believe it's all private donations, volunteer work. There are other stories with men. There was one guy I read about. His son died at a fairly young age. I think he was in his late teens or early 20s. And this guy wrote a book about his son, not only from his own personal experiences, but involving his son's friends. I believe he had a girlfriend at one stage, and he interviewed them, and he was interviewed about the book, and he said it was a grieving process. There's other silly examples like, all right, it's fake, it's in a TV program, but a guy who was widowed early, and he built a bed for he and his wife when she was alive, and when she died, he made 2 small busts to go on the top of the bedposts, one of him and one of his wife. So men cope by doing. It's part of the reason with some of the stuff I've gone through, I threw myself into my work.
Yeah, one of the signs of a man who is suffering can be them being addicted to their job. That's another thing that can become unhealthy, that we didn't mention. Like you can become extremely overworked. I've also noticed he won't talk to me or anyone else, but there's a man around my town who looks very bedraggled, who I don't think is homeless, but he will go and he will sit in like the train station or like the middle of the town center and read a newspaper or a book for hour after hour, hour after hour. And it's very clear that he's running away from something at home. But, you know, it's very hard to engage with somebody who won't even say, you know, talk to you. Yeah, I think he's off in a silent space of his own and he doesn't want to be disturbed. So, you know, sometimes you do have to leave people alone. But, you know, that's not always what's best for them ultimately, but it may be what they need at that point. But yeah, the men's shed thing, I actually, there's other stuff as well. I seem to recall Lads Need Dads is a really good Twitter account that I follow. And really, really positive stuff in like trying to give boys positive male role models and things like that. But I think the people probably underestimate how much men need to be, like, men need family. So, like, if you've got a man who's maybe like lost a son or something, then putting him into the Lads Need Dads program would, you know, like, I hope I'm not giving you the wrong organization here, because there's actually a couple of different organizations on Twitter that I follow, and it might be the wrong organization. But, you know, a dad who's maybe missing a son could perhaps get some sort of catharsis from helping another boy to, like, find himself.
I've met Sonia Sheljon from the amazing organisation. Unfortunately, it's literally 2 small towns in Essex, and it's the only places that she can work because that's where she is.
Yeah, I've spoken to them, and they seem really, really nice and really energetic and really positive. And they seem to be doing, like, even if it's a small scale, they seem to be making positive change.
I'm not a religious man, but
yeah.
Who are we talking about now?
Lads Need Dads.
Okay.
I'm not a religious man, but she's doing God's work, is that woman.
Yeah, I think so too. She's really, really nice. They all are. I mean, like every interaction I've had with them has on Twitter has made me feel like I'm this like dirty little hobo coming out of the Twitter cave, and like there's this shining example of everything Twitter should be. Yeah, I mean, like it's stuff like that, and there's even like there's other programs I've heard of where they're not just limited to men, but they like there's this pen pal program for people in care homes where they all basically be assigned a child, like, or a couple of children who are maybe like missing their grandparents, and they will be surrogate grandparents, and they'll write letters and send postcards, and the kids will come see them, and it just seems really awesome, and I think it gives, I really like these programs where both sides get something out of it, where you like solve two problems in one go.
I did want to mention briefly like the social isolation of the elderly generally, but I think particularly of elderly men can get really rough. I know that some organisations, so like Age UK, have services a bit like what you're describing, where volunteers come and interact, and they have something to interact on other than the telly. Because for a lot of elderly people who aren't doing so well, they're getting into their later years, they're like often doing everything they can to not go to a care home. Because care homes are like horrible for so many reasons, but that does mean that they become like incredibly isolated.
Yeah, the care homes are basically death factories. They're where you go to be shuffled off into your casket as quickly and conveniently as possible.
It depends. Like sometimes you have some elderly homes that are almost like homes, and the old people sit around and interact with each other, and it's quite positive. But then other times they go to like a nursing home, and it's like the only time you see someone is when you're being fed, and they do that as quickly as possible, which is extremely fucked up.
Yeah, a lot of those places also have like black mold in the ventilation and stuff like that, and like they're not very clean, and they're very like the person might have been left in bed for a week at a time.
The quality of elderly care homes varies tremendously. Definitely, there's disability.
I've heard it described as a scandal.
And being elderly, like, to me, these are some of the most serious human rights violations that happen in the country, but the issues are so complex that I'm not even ready to begin advocating for it seriously. There's so much like systemic discrimination as well, and so many laws that are tremendously fucked, but it's just too complicated for me.
Yeah, there's an awful lot of stuff, but there are laws that are just being broken, and there's nobody looking up on it and checking in, because it's the elderly, it's like, who really cares is the attitude, that they're adults, and like they should be able to fend for themselves, but obviously they can't, because your legs are giving out, your back's giving out, you're shuffling around, you might not even be able to get up. It's you are disabled, like you are disabled by your age, and you're becoming increasingly frail and crippled, and it's a horrible thing to go through, and they're not really getting any support.
Yep. Actually, dementia is like a bigger factor in this problem than even the physical side of it, because often they are physically supported to an extent, but I don't know, seeing the effects of dementia can be quite scary to a lot of people, and they don't really want to engage with it. So even if they're in family, they will like visit like twice a year, if at all. You know, it's rough.
Yeah. The stupid thing though is that you can actually, you can improve somebody, even with somebody with dementia's life by like helping them and giving them flashcards and things like that. And you can, you can like improve their symptoms by just diet and giving them a bit of exercise and things like that. You can't solve it, you can't fix it, but you can help them.
My grandfather had dementia, and to make matters worse, he also had a stroke and couldn't speak. So it was there were no cards or anything that was offered to him like that. I don't know why. It's never actually occurred to me before. Like communicating through pictures or motioning at a picture. I don't know why that was never done. I mean, he was in a care home.
Really?
Yeah, it was in two different ones. I mean, he was 90 odd when he passed, so he did have a long life. But the first home he was at, they had a lot of problems with him because he acted out a lot. So we had to move him to another one. In the first one where they had problems, ironically enough, it was one that was specifically for Jehovah's Witnesses because that was what he was. And that he gave a lot to that church over his many years of life, and that they basically threw him out of the first one. It's ridiculous how they turned their back on him after all he gave to them.
Well, I wonder why he was acting out if, he can't communicate his needs in any way. Like, you're going to get pissed off if you just need some support with something, and
frustration and confusion.
Personally, like I see a lot of people with Parkinson's face similar issues, and it's luck of the draw whether or not the people that support them are any good at it.
It really does depend, and maybe he was too much to deal with, but it's very hard to tell. And I think they probably should have brought in other support as well to help him. I can't understand why they didn't have the charts.
Yeah, it sounds like to me like not too much effort was made, because if it doesn't occur to you to use non-verbal forms of communication, I don't know, that's just fucking ridiculous.
You can if you go to the NHS, they've got pre-made charts, like just a couple of pieces of paper with words on them and pictures, and they're very, very easy to use, very, very handy. And you can say yes and no. You can say I'm hungry, I need the toilet. You can say all sorts of things, and they can bring out other charts if those ones don't work. They've got a whole list, lots of them, and you can go on the internet and print them off. There's no excuse there. It's like these, and unless you're just absolutely so incompetent at your job you don't know what these things are. I mean, these are very, very basic things. Like another really basic thing you can have is just a little whiteboard with a pen. Like that's a very, very basic thing that they'll hand out to you. Like if you go into certain places, if you can't talk, like they'll just give you a whiteboard and a pen, and you can write on it, you can draw on it, and you can communicate that way. Or a notepad, piece of paper, and a pen. It's not very hard.
Yep, and just something I was going to say a minute ago was a huge part of why people decline with dementia is because they're not getting social interaction, and because they're around people who they can't really socially interact with. And a huge reason of why people don't recover from strokes is because of the way that we treat them as well.
You know, I've seen a study that says if you give an elderly person a plant to look after, just a plant, it will massively increase their life expectancy.
Yep, because they're having to have a perception of time. They're having to engage with something. They're
They
having
have to care for something.
they're having to care for something. But there's so many essential thinking skills that we take for granted. Where when suddenly you have nothing to do, no responsibilities, and less ability to move, that these things do fall away if you don't have something to use them on. So yeah, even giving people a plant, massive effects. I've seen that study as well.
Yeah, another thing that I've seen, which seems to be a major predictor of an old person having a life and being active, is having a dog. You know, having a dog is a major thing. It gets you out of the house. You've got a companion who actually cares about you, unlike a plant. You know, that dog looks up to you with big puppy eyes, literally, and you know you've got a reason to go on, and you've got to, you know, I mean that's actually something which helps homeless people as well, is having a pet dog. The homeless who seem to be the most together and the most like you know, have the best prospects are the ones who have a pet who they look after. And those dogs are the best behaved dogs you've ever met in your life.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned this earlier in one of the chats like a few days ago, but one of the things that blocks you getting into shelters a lot of the time is the fact that you have a dog. So this is a tangent, but one little solution that I thought of, like one potential thing you could do, is to just have a service where you can hand over your dog for like, you know, just for them to look after, and then you can come and get it, take it away whenever you want. Like something like that would make a huge difference, because I know so many homeless people, and I go and talk to them and I go, you know, there's this particular shelter is like really good, really, really good. You know, why don't you go towards it? And it's like, well, I've been there and they don't let me in because I have a dog. And it's not overwhelmingly, but about half the time, the people that I meet sitting down on the street, like, have a dog and can't go to shelters because they have a dog. So I do think it would have a large effect. There's some sort of supporting. I know it sounds ridiculous, but like support their dogs.
I think a much better solution would be to have homeless shelters be aware that homeless people do care about their dogs, and they're not just going to give them up to the shelter, which is what they tell them to do. They tell them to give the dog away. Yeah.
Yep, that's absolutely true. Like they absolutely will not give up their dog to go in a shelter.
Yeah, I mean, if you can see that the homeless person is, you know, cognizant that you don't want dog poop on the floor, then just let in the dog. I mean, they're very, very well behaved. You know, if you give them if you give them some rules to follow, you know, that they can keep their dogs there, you know, as long as they follow these rules, then they will do it, because like they care about those dogs more than they care about themselves a lot of the time. That's why they'll stay out in the streets.
Not allowed, and it's not like a local policy thing of any particular organization. Like in services that are involved in public health, you just can't bring dogs, and it is something that needs to change. It's like even with domestic violence shelters, like you can't bring your dog like a lot of the time.
Yeah, and people don't want to give up their dogs. I mean, this is the other side of me, like what I said earlier about it gives you purpose in your life, and there's this other being who looks up to you and, you know, loves you. You also love that dog back, and you don't want to have them hurt. You don't want to put them in a shelter where they might just be euthanized for no reason, because they just don't have the space. Or it might be sent off to, some family somewhere else. You want to keep your dog. You love that dog. And it's, it's really, you can't say to somebody who's in a horrible situation, we'll help you if you give your dog away to this service which may or may not kill them. You just can't do that. I mean, that's as bad as turning them away, because there's very, very few people who are heartless enough who would bring their dog with them and then be heartless enough to say, well, okay, I'll just give the dog away.
Have any of you guys seen that video of the SJW or SJWs taking a homeless guy's dog off him?
That sounds really fucked up and makes me angry. Please link it.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, but please do link to it. Although, to be honest, I don't want to watch it because that sort of thing's the sort of thing that inspires violence in me.
Yeah. Something very relevant to this conversation, especially when it comes to homelessness. I thought you were going to mention it, Painter, but have you heard of a street cat named Bob at all, anyone?
I've seen the trailer for the film.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that. Sorry, I absolutely love that film. I think it really does get into a lot of the trappings of homelessness, how people, the people that homeless people are around are often involved with the drugs. And when you're trying to, go through rehab and not be around that anymore, well, you have no one else to be around. You have no one else to do things with, and you put back into the same places. And with that constantly, in your face all the time, it's really difficult not to get trapped into that kind of lifestyle again and again, because there's no ongoing support after you get out of the rehab.
Yeah. I think we shouldn't assume that any one homeless person is on drugs, but it is a problem in, for lack of a word, the homeless community, that drugs are a thing that go around. And when you're on the street, there's a very limited number of things you can do for entertainment or to make time go past or to numb away the pain and stuff like that. And drugs are one of them. Drugs are almost the only one.
It's honestly a massive problem. It is a huge problem. Even a lot of people won't go to certain kinds of shelters if they take drugs as well, because they what they do is they basically search their rooms sometimes, unannounced. And if they find drugs, then they take drugs away. And a lot of homeless don't go to shelters because they don't want to lose their drugs.
You really have to treat it as a health problem, a mental
I agree.
health problem. People don't take drugs unless there's something horrible in their life that they're trying to get away with, unless it's something like pot where they're just out for a good time. It's usually, if they're on heroin or something like that, it's because nothing in the world seems to make them feel good. And so, this thing does. So shoot it up.
Absolutely. I'm not stigmatizing drug users or homeless people. But drug use is very high in homeless communities. And
self-medication.
Massive barrier. Well, I mean, it's like you say, if you've been sitting on the street cold, people are treating you like shit, you've been attacked, you have this whole feeling of everything's against me because I've tried to get help and it hasn't worked. And you've been miserable for weeks, and you can just feel good if you shoot up or whatever. That is hard to try to turn them away from. With drug addiction generally, one of the hardest things to argue against is when they say that taking the drugs makes them feel like how other people feel normally. And to sort of ask them to give that up and be like, no, you just have to like tough it out and feel like shit is brutal.
Yeah. I kind of have a rule that I generally don't ask them about drugs. Like I just don't. Even in like I mean I have done a couple of interviews with the homeless, and if they want to talk about drugs, let them bring it up. Don't ask them about drugs, because it's well, it's rude really, just to start with, and for another it can close them down, and they'll feel like, you know, they being treated like a person is currency to the homeless.
I completely agree with that. I think that if any service is going to do anything about the drug problem, then it should be trying to support them in ending their addiction and support their mental health, as opposed to trying to police them, which is how it is a lot of the time currently.
Well, ejecting them from the town is a big thing. Like, I don't even know what. There doesn't seem to be really a strategy so much as get them out of the town, and if you find their like tent out in the wilderness, put a notice on it telling them to remove it, and if they don't remove it, take it away.
In the UK,
if we remove it, find it.
In the UK, there was a thing for a while where we literally just put spikes on the ground so that they couldn't stay there, which is like so backwards and disgusting.
Yeah.
So well, where do you expect
metal? Yeah.
Yeah, just like metal spikes.
Metal benches are the same thing. If you see a metal bench at a train station or a park or anything like that, and you sit on it, you feel, oh, this is freezing cold. That's the point. The entire point of those benches is to make it difficult for the homeless to sleep on them. That's why they have those weird central bars as well. It's to stop, that's just horrible. I mean, okay, you don't like looking at them, but that's such a weak problem. It's such a aristocratic problem. It's the sort of problem that you have when you've got enough money to solve that problem, but you really just you use that money instead to brush the problem away, because in your mind the problem is that this unsightly heap of rags is in the way, and that unsightly heap of rags will go away if you make it uncomfortable for them there. So I think that is the thinking there. They don't even think of them as human. They think of them as an obstruction, as criminals, and so on and so forth. And now, I'm not saying the homeless aren't criminals. I'm not saying that they are. There are homeless people who are criminals. There are homeless people who are completely honest in every way. And honestly, major props to the ones that are, but I don't blame the ones that do steal, because when you're on the street, I mean, I would steal if I was on the street, because the maximum thing that can go wrong if you steal when you're on the streets is sudden free accommodation. Like that's your worst case scenario if you steal when you're on the streets.
With a hot meal and a warm bed.
Yeah, well, not necessarily a warm bed, but definitely a meal, and definitely no rain on your head. But yeah.
3 hots and a cot, as it were.
Yeah. I mean, the cot may be a bit of styrofoam, but it is a cot and it's indoors, and you may even be on your own if you're lucky. It's.
I was just going to say about drugs, by the way. My mum used to have a saying: drugs are for people who can't handle reality. Reality is for people who can't handle drugs.
That is amusing. So, yeah. I mean, I think
Unfortunately-
that.
Unfortunately, she died of a drugs overdose. So
Yeah, possibly won't take that advice then. Yeah, I mean, I do feel like the homeless crisis is a problem we could solve very, very easily by simply taking all of these empty homes, which are very much going into disrepair, and buying them up and giving them to people. I mean, that's a proven strategy. Like, they've shown that that works. You give people a home, you enfranchise them, and they can suddenly get a job and they can suddenly take part in society. Like, I mean,
Best place-
Hmm?
the best places to use are former military bases. Obviously, our military's been downgraded somewhat, so there's old Air Force bases, naval bases, army bases with massive barracks on them. How hard would it really be to refurbish those barracks buildings and turn them into essentially hostels?
Well, if they've only recently been
the truth of the matter is we have enough vacant properties and enough properties that people don't use or use as a second home or whatever to actually house everyone in Britain. We do. It's just the matter of people not wanting to them belonging to others and things like that. The public aren't willing to make a stand on it because they're not homeless.
I think if they spoke to the homeless, then they might be much more willing to make a stand. But obviously, the homeless are very easy to walk past.
Even a change where, you're obligated to let a homeless person in if they provide ID to a vacant home or something like that would be huge. And, because you've given them their ID, they could still be prosecuted if they damage the property the same as anyone else, like any tenant. I mean, that could potentially work quite well.
Those matters, as far as I know, if it's in a home that you're living in, I think that goes through civil court, not criminal court. And people who are homeless, they don't have money to pay for any of that.
Yeah, but it still escalates towards, if they can't pay, it still escalates towards criminal courts, doesn't it?
No. So that'd be called debtor's prison. We abolished that.
Okay, so I clearly need to do some research.
Well, I still think there's a lot of room to buy up old tenement houses if we can find out who owns them. Get a committee to, or something to, basically their job is to go out and find these places which can be bought to be, not so much refurbished, just cleaned up and given to the homeless, because even the most basic accommodation is better than a bit of cardboard. It's been proven that if you give the homeless just a home to, before it gets too late and they're too far gone, you give them somewhere to stay, and they will turn around most of the time, and it will have an impact on hospitals where the homeless often go just to have somewhere to sleep. They might fake an injury to try and get into hospital, or make an actual injury, or
yeah. I know of a lot of cases where homeless individuals have effectively made themselves disabled because they will then get disability and disability payments and disability support and care and those sorts of things.
Yeah, that's an actual thing. As is simply getting so sick because you're on the street in the middle of winter, that you end up in hospital just through no fault of your own. That's also a major thing.
We've gone on a whole thing of Sorry, we've gone on a whole thing of going towards homelessness, but whilst we're here, I may as well shout out that I think that state provided like antiseptic wipes and plasters could actually have a huge effect, because I've actually seen so many homeless people that are like literally overwhelmed with infection from just tons of tiny cuts and scrapes and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, yeah, that would help as well. I mean, one thing that is good if a homeless person asks you for food or something, go into the shop, buy them a bit of food, make sure it's stuff that they don't, is like pre-cooked and stuff like that, because they don't have any way to cook it. So ready meals and not ready meals, but like pasta pots and things like that, like the most nutritious stuff you can find, but also antiseptic wipes and things like that. They're a huge help. I mean, I've spoken to several who've actually specifically asked for things to get clean with, like toothbrushes and toothpaste, ask them if they need stuff like that.
Yeah, there's often little services and little charities that go around and give homeless people things like underwear and socks, gloves for when it's cold, blankets, hot water bottles, but also medical supplies and food as well. And those things are great and probably should be encouraged and state funded a bit more than they are.
Yeah, like a little pack of paracetamol, stuff like that. Like that can make a huge impact on somebody's day. It's just like having a headache pill, for.
I remember one time there was a girl who was homeless and she was diabetic, and you can clearly see like she wasn't faking it, like her blood sugar was super low. And she was like incredibly pale, and yeah, like simple things can really make a difference.
Yeah, a pack of biscuits. Like biscuits are an amazing thing to give the homeless as long as they're not too sugary, because you obviously don't want to rot their teeth either. But if they've got a toothbrush and toothpaste, then biscuits are really good, because you've got this tube of food and it's pretty good, and you can take a few out, you can eat them, and you can save the rest for later. You can maybe even get like crackers and cheese. You can that's almost a sandwich, like crackers and cheese. And you don't want to have too many of those, but you can have a whole variety of things. You can have like pasta pots are a really good one. Sandwiches are good. Like ask them what they want as well. Don't force on them what you want to give them. Go up to them, and say, hey, can I get you anything from the shop? I'm going in there anyway. And, don't make a big deal out of it. And if they say, no, it's okay, respect that. And if they say, oh, can I have this and can I have that? Then as long as it's, stuff that's you think's going to help them, then sure, go ahead and do it. Don't give them cans that need a can opener, that sort of thing. But, you can give them like, all sorts of things that can be, very useful. I mean, all sorts of things that you might not even think might be useful, but are really, really useful to them, like antiseptic hand gel. Before the COVID crisis, that was something that you giving out to the homeless was quite a good thing to do, because it massively ups their ability to keep themselves clean.
Yeah. I've flirted with the idea for a long time of just some sort of service that you go in with some ingredients and they will make it up for you into some kind of meal. Even if it's something simple as like a sandwich. Like if you go in with a loaf of bread and some ham, and they could store what you've got for you.
Yeah.
Like, it's a lot better than just eating random bits of ready-made shit.
Oh yeah. A locker would be a really good idea. Like I knew a guy who I said I would try and see if they had any lockers down the train station, and just, he was so thankful just because I was offering to see, maybe find him a place where he could put this big heavy backpack that he had, that was safe, that was secure, and that wasn't going to run away from him. And that's quite a major thing for them, having somewhere safe to lock things up. But unfortunately, it didn't pan out because they didn't have anything like that at the train station. I thought they might have, but it turned out to be a bike rental service that I'd confused for a bike lockup.
Yeah, I mean, that is actually a huge thing where, for the coming winter, they get, their blankets, and they get their, like, big coats and big socks and big gloves and all of that. But then when it's summer, like, are they just going to carry that shit around? No, they actually just throw it away because there's nowhere to keep it. If they're conscientious, then they might redonate it to, like, some service or charity for it to be donated again later. But I don't know. I think if those services specifically, recorded that it was them giving them that stuff, and then they could get it back later, like them specifically, then maybe more people would engage with it.
Yeah, that would be a really good idea, but it'd be very, very hard to work out because you'd kind of have to do it at a homeless shelter or something.
Well, like the Salvation Army, if people go to jacket, and then they just get they show their ID if they've got any, or they take a picture. Yeah, and they can potentially get it back in 6 months' time or a year's time when it's cold again.
Freshly laundered as well. That would be a good idea. Yeah, just a service that would let them wash things, like let them wash their clothes and things. Because, I mean, I've seen that things that we would use for years, they'll use for a couple of weeks and they'll use it completely to death, like socks and things like that. They'll just wear them into nothing, and they'll take them off and they'll just be sock soup, and they can't wash them, so they throw them away.
Yeah, I mean, vouchers for laundrettes would be huge. I mean, this is a problem that, like you say, it's easily solvable in so many ways and easy to improve in so many ways. But people really just don't really give a shit to actually do these things.
I think it's not just that people don't care. It's that there are so many charities. There are so many charities. And we only have a finite amount of money. And so we feel like our money's being torn in all sorts of different directions by these charities. And so we actually give less because of that. I mean, I think that's an actual thing where you feel like there's so many different drains on your, potential drains on your money, and so many people asking you for money that you just sort of clam up tighter and you don't give anything.
Yeah, that's actually a huge thing. In my local community, well, there's like two main charities, and so they tend to do quite well. Because it is just, they do everything. Like, they fund everything, so people don't feel like there's more support than there really is.
Yeah, you do really need those umbrella charities, and they do kind of have to be very well run, very well managed, and they have to be, they have to not be run by scumbags who will get donations to the homeless shelter of food and stuff, and then immediately put it in their car, which is something that I've heard of happening from the homeless. So they've seen a big delivery of bacon or something get taken to the homeless shelter, and then a few minutes after the truck's gone, they'll see somebody loading it into their car out the back, and off they go with it, and the homeless don't get any of it.
Fucking hell.
yeah, that's something that like a homeless person I know witnessed happening.
One
They just
thing,
took it with them.
in the UK, since the introduction of universal credit, I mean, it's not just people who we think of as poor or homeless who use food banks and things like that anymore. It's a lot of more people, and they just don't have the funding anymore. They don't have the food. Several have closed because they're not getting enough funding anymore under the Conservative government. And I do think it's disgraceful the way that we're treating the poor people and the homeless people, and no one really cares until they're in that situation themselves. I mean, a lot of people now, because of COVID and everything, they are losing their job or getting furloughed or whatever. And maybe the one good thing that could happen because of that is that they realize how hard that money is to live on, and appreciate other people's position in the world a bit more.
They demonstrated because of COVID that they're completely capable of housing the homeless, because in the UK we had a huge thing where, although a lot of homeless people didn't seize the opportunity, where homeless people were set up in hotels with hotel vouchers. So they just showed, completely that they can deal with this problem. And so I'm hoping that the push to do it is, going to come as a result.
I would caution people to be careful about believing the newspapers when they're saying anything about things that are helping the homeless. Because when you actually talk to the homeless, hotel vouchers are often cap out at like a week. Like they'll be in there for a few days at most. And often, actual example from near where I am is there was a patch under this bridge which was really nice and warm, where the homeless set up a little camp, and they had like a fire and things like that. And the council didn't like it, and the shop nearby didn't like it. So basically, they did this big thing where they put in the newspapers that they were going to house them all. They were going to give them accommodation, and then they gave them hotel vouchers for a few days, which was long enough for them to clear everything out from under the bridge, and then put up a big nasty fence so that none of them could get back in. And then the hotel vouchers expired. The problem was solved as far as the newspapers were concerned, and the homeless were back on the streets within a week.
I mean, you're completely right in that, the newspapers are very manipulative in how they portray whether a problem's being solved or not in reality.
It's not just the newspapers, it's what they're being told as well, because the capacity for newspapers to blindly believe their sources is something that I think most people are only just coming to grips with, but it's something that everyone should really be aware of. The council gives a statement about it. The newspaper then reports the statement as if it were fact, and everyone moves on with their lives. It's something we've seen as a movement where, the BBC recently did a thing about Johnny Depp's libel case, and they literally just reported on what the case was telling them, and so on and so forth, and they made Johnny sound like an abuser, even though we actually know that that's not the case, and we have evidence that strongly suggests that Amber is the only abuser in that relationship. It doesn't have to be malicious. It can purely be a case of not knowing and not having enough information and being outside their remit and so on. But obviously there are hugely agenda-driven papers, and you should be aware of that too. But back onto the homeless, I could tell you some things that would make your blood boil. It used to be that you could, I think it's Lidl, I'm not actually sure, it might be Aldi actually, you could go in their bins, their big bins, and get fresh food out. And you could just go through there and get as much fresh food as you wanted. And then they caught wise to that. And so now what they do is they keep back some bins, and they have a sequence of bins that they put out. So by the time the stuff gets to the street where you can get to it, everything inside is rotten, stinking, and filthy, and covered in maggots, so that you can't actually, use it. And I've also heard tell of a manager who noticed that the homeless were getting crisps and things like that out of the bin behind their grocery. And so they went back there and they instead of putting the crisps in whole, they'd chop the bags up and sprinkle them into the bottom of the bin. They'd even pour bleach over food and things like that. There's this aggressive trend towards I don't want this, but you can't have it, and I'm going to make sure you can't have it. And I think it's incredibly spiteful, especially when companies like Pret and people like that will often give out food to the homeless in the local area, and they will often recruit students and people like that to go out and give them, just give out the sandwiches at the end of the day and stuff like that. I mean, I've seen that as well. So you can have companies doing either, but there doesn't seem to be lots of middle ground there.
I do agree with you. It's just from a business perspective, it's because their products are going away for free, and if everyone could do that, then they at the end of the day, then they'd not go in and buy things when they're trying to sell those things, and they just go and wait and get it for free when they have to throw out the leftovers. So that's why they do it. It's not actually out of malice, even though I disagree with it.
I can understand that perspective a little bit, but at the same time, I feel if somebody is desperate enough to be digging through a bin, what money do they have to go in your shop and buy things? They're likely going to go into your shop and buy things with their money anyway, but this is them extending their money. I mean, I do understand that perspective, and I think it is immoral. I think it is just indefensible from a moral perspective that you would do that. But I mean, obviously, I also understand that some fear being sued, which is ridiculous as well, because I don't like this series, Adam Ruins Everything, and I think he lies about a lot of things. But one thing he got absolutely right was a quote saying, why are you afraid of being sued by the hungry, basically? You're terrified of being sued by people who are starving. And food is like the most basic thing you can buy. So what was that?
I was saying that's pretty funny, to be honest. Yeah, it's like as if a homeless person is going to be able to take on a fucking massive supermarket corporation. Come on.
Yeah, if they did a class action suit, they might be able to afford a lawyer who has been disbarred. If they all pooled their money together, they could possibly afford a takeaway. It's
as if they're gonna pull their money together to launch a fucking lawsuit against Audi.
Yeah, the change they've got in their pockets. It's stupid. I mean, it's like if Tesco's actually done this thing where they'll give away a few meals worth of stuff that's going, it's on the turn. But I mean, you could. There's a very easy way to solve that whole suing thing. It's basically declare the food free to go, but at your own risk. I mean, if that makes them feel better, then by all means. I mean, I've never heard anyone sue anyone over food they got out of a bin behind a shop, and it would be out of date anyway, wouldn't it? By definition. It's kind of silly. But anyway, I think we've come to a natural end here. It's now 7:25, and so would everyone like to maybe go off and get their dinners and things like that? How are we feeling about the chat?
Can we just summarize what we came up with as potential solutions for male isolation? So what was
Okay,
it?
sure.
Men's sheds and men's...
Men's sheds, yeah.
We talked about extracurricular activities.
Yep. The NHS Mental Health Trust is horribly underfunded, but there are charities they can direct you to who will help, like I think the Shaw Trust is one of them. And there are a whole range of other services you can get out there. You can Google things. You can go and find all kinds of things on Google that will help you. You just have to reach out to these people. And talking to your doctor is a good way to get there. Just don't be fobbed off with pills. Because pills usually don't solve the problem unless you're schizophrenic or something.
And potentially anything that would fix bullying in schools, extracurricular activities at schools.
Mediation in schools is a major thing that helps bullying. If you sit down a bully and their victim in a classroom and let them talk it over with a teacher there, quite often you solve the situation, and that's something that helps with crime as well in a lot of cases. It does depend on the crime, but sitting somebody down with a criminal who's maybe assaulted them or something, quite often the person who assaulted them will break down in tears or something like that, and there will be forgiveness on both sides, and you will solve the situation in a way which doesn't ruin anyone's lives.
Mm-hmm. So more government funding towards charities and towards NHS mental health, tackling boys being medicated unjustifiably.
Don't do that.
Yep.
Use the funding from the medication to fund the NHS would be my bet. But I think that a major thing that should happen is reviews of charities as well, because we do have some charities which are absolutely smash their head on the wall insane. Like, obviously the domestic violence charities are a big one there, but there's also a lot of corruption, homelessness charities, and things like that. It's the old thing where the charity is begging for money from everyone, but they pay their boss very, very well.
Yeah. That will come down mostly to the CQC, which is the Care Quality Commission, investigating them. But I'll tell you straight up that they are dog shit. They are absolutely worthless.
You need a commission to review them.
And enforcing higher standards.
Yeah, well, they're probably very underfunded for a start. It's a problem. The annoying thing is that these are all problems we could solve very, very easily. They'd make the system better. They would actually cost less money in the long run, but getting people to do them is, it's a pain in the ass. And so you're left up to individuals to maybe help out where they can. But obviously, the NHS, my experiences with them have been very good, even if their waiting lists are very long. Like, I've never had a complaint about the NHS except that it's underfunded. But in any case, I think...
I have heard some complaints, especially with NHS mental health, to do with them just being kind of incompetent. Like, I know people that have rang the crisis team, for example, and they're just saying oh, have a cup of tea, you'll be all right, and trying to get them off the phone. And it's fuck off. You have a cup of tea and calm down and get back to me.
Yeah, you do need to approach everyone who calls and that sort of thing with a level of sympathy.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, definitely if there was, I mean, some of these services you spoke about sound fantastic, like the thing to do with writing pen pals and stuff. You know, that doesn't cost anything to link people up.
No, you've really just got to check in on them and see how it's going. And that's about it. And that's like a once a month phone call, maybe. If that. Like, you can even taper that off and, you know, they're managing it on their own. Like, that's something that can be run by the care home itself even. But obviously, a lot of these care homes are trying to cut as much money as possible to make as much money as possible. But in any case, I think we should call it now because, you know, it's been going on for 2.5 hours. So.
All right, cool. Yeah. Fair enough. Well, it's good talking as always. More funding for community centres. That was the last thing I wanted to mention. Yep.
Oh, yes. Yep. All right. Well, one way we can try and get that is to write to your local MP. Tell them about the issues that you think are valid in your community and pressure them on it. Don't let them give you a meandering form stock response. You know, get back to them and talk to them. If they're any good, then you will get somewhere with them eventually. It does depend on the person, obviously, and how attached to the Tory party they are. In any case, good night, everyone.
All right, have a good one.
And thank you to everyone who's listened on the stream as well.
Night. Take care, everyone.
Night.